Damn street niggas, we ain't really comfortable with all of that damn. I know what you're trying to say.
Do what you do, baby.
Yeah, I want congrats. I seen it come up through the mud. You feel me?
Real
Yeah, I'm saying, like I said, I used to be top. I'm one of the ones. When that nigga said he had a phone, his whole joke, man, I'm looking at the screen like preach, cause I was on the phone with him. You feel me? So you know what I'm saying?
It's Pete Dun the General. To Nola Podcast. To keep your body clean, huh? Yeah. I hope everybody's having a very Nola night, and we have a very special edition of Speaking of General. All right, we got the elder in the building. Mr. Chris, can you reintroduce yourself in case they didn't see the last live?
Okay, I'm Chris Matthews, also known as Christopher J. I'm
Don't do that. Don't do that.
Hey, that's customs and courtesy, man. Whenever somebody salute you, you got to return the salute.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right, so I'm originally from New Orleans. I live in Columbus, Georgia now. I live and work here. I got out of Fort Benning back in 2002, and I've been here ever since.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, man, the elder, we've been talking behind the scenes. So we came up with a scenario. The youngins haven't went through what they preach. So what we're gonna do tonight is we're gonna take a step back and we're gonna go back in time, and we're gonna send y'all through it through the thoughts of Mr. Chris. Right, Mr. Chris?
Sounds good to me, brother. Let's make it work.
Okay, so first, when you were young, growing up, they had amazing leaders, Malcolm, Martin. Those are the only two I know, but forgive me. So, okay.
So, first of all, let me correct you, because Malcolm and Martin were before my time.
Okay.
Yeah, so keeping it real on that. That was during my parents' time.
Yes, sir.
Dr. King was actually assassinated a few months before I was born.
Okay.
So when we talk about those elders, we're talking about people who my parents got to experience, but who I only got to experience through anecdote or through stories, through experiences that were experienced by others.
Absolutely.
But they were major influences to me in terms of what I learned from my parents about them. 1968, the 60s in general were very turbulent times, and the 60s were when I was born. I was born in October of 1968. I came up in the 70s and the 80s, times that were basically influenced by the 60s, but they were times in and of themselves.
Did you witness early in your life any direct racism?
Personally, the racism that I experienced was the subtle type.
Mm-hmm.
It was the subtle. I'll put it this way. George Bush, former president George Bush,
That guy,
the younger one,
mm-hmm.
he talked, you know how they say a broken clock is right 2 times a day.
Mm-hmm.
He had this saying that he used in a speech. He talked about the soft bigotry of low expectations.
Mm.
In other words, he had this idea that expecting our people to not advance was a form of bigotry in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
So he had this idea that providing for our needs when we were impoverished was a form of bigotry. No, it's not a form of bigotry to try to make up for some of the things that we've had to deal with historically. That wasn't a form of bigotry, but that's what he called it. And the type of bigotry that I've experienced in my time was that type of bigotry. This low expectations. I would always get, well, wow, you're very articulate, or you are so smart. And always the unspoken part of that sentence was
To be a black guy.
for a black guy. Yeah. You speak very well, unspoken for a black guy.
Mm-hmm.
There were times when I was coming home from college because I attended Loyola University while I was back there for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I would always come home on the bus, St. Bernard Senate bus, and I'd be walking home from the bus stop to Gibson Street, where I used to live in the heart of the St. Bernard Project. And a couple of times I get stopped by the police.
Mm.
Where you going? What you doing? Can I see some ID? One of these times when I was walking home from Dillard, as a matter of fact, I was coming home from the Gentilly Shopping Center out there by Dillard. I'll walk there and I'll walk back from where I live.
Mm-hmm.
I got stopped right outside of Dillard by the by NOPD because it was late and I was walking home late. So
Walking
he
while
pulls
black, huh?
Yeah, walking while black, basically.
Mm-hmm.
He pulls me over, pulls my ID, and he runs my ID. He says, I want to hand it to you, Matthews. You're the first person who I pulled up who does not have any record whatsoever. I'm like, this joker here. I don't want to say what I actually say.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's the type of bigotry that I dealt with.
Okay.
The quote unquote soft bigotry of low expectations. But in that last scenario that I just talked about, that wasn't even soft bigotry. That was just straight up bigotry. I mean, there's this saying that my mom used once. A lot of times people think that a black man is not fully dressed unless he has a criminal record on when he goes out when he goes out in the evening.
That I don't mean to laugh, but that shit was funny. That's cool. All right, so can you speak about what more the young generation have than the generation had when you were younger?
The access to knowledge is so much more the knowledge that's so much more readily available.
Mm-hmm.
You have the internet. We had the library. You have
Google.
Yeah, Google. You have the World Wide Web. You can talk to people across the world in seconds. When we were coming up, we had dial-up.
Look, the little thing.
Yeah.
The little thing where you gotta wind the phone up, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
the internet is faster now than it's ever been. And the younger generation has access to that. You have some of the same knowledge that's there, but you have quicker access to that knowledge.
But they don't have the experience to go along with that knowledge.
Right. And that's the sad thing. We gain so much so quickly. And this goes for my generation as well as for the younger generation. We have gained so much so quickly that we generally don't know what to do with it.
Mm.
I mean, I'm a 20th century guy living in the 21st century.
Mm-hmm.
I'm living in the future that I never thought, that I only dreamed was possible.
Mm.
And now I'm trying to figure out what to do with it, just like everyone else is.
So let me ask you this, Mr. Chris.
Mm-hmm.
In the time where you came up, when the information that you speaking of was so limited, but the need, the want, and the the drive to get it was so big. Now is information on top of information on top of information, but that need, that want, and that drive to get it has diminished. In your opinion, where did that drive go?
That's hard to say. I can only speculate that a lot of people nowadays are just living in survival mode. When you're living in survival mode, the only thing that you're worrying about while in survival mode is, what am I going to do next in order to keep me alive? What can I do next in order to keep me drawing my breath so that I can at least have some downtime to figure out what my next move will be creatively or expressively? And the problem with living in survival mode is you might survive, but you never really live. If you can understand what I'm saying.
Well, I know exactly what you're saying.
So we have to get out of that mindset of being in survival mode and get to the point where we are living. And we can't do it if we can't do that as long as we're doing stuff to distract ourselves from reality rather than just standing there and dealing with it.
Okay, now let me ask you this, right? I was born in 1985. You say you came up in the 70s and the 80s, right?
Right.
What was the difference from, let's say, 1980 to 1990?
I think 1980, for me personally, we were looking for things to do. We had a struggle that we were trying to overcome.
Mm-hmm.
And in the 90s, it was like, well, we're still struggling, but by and large, we got pretty much some of the things that we've been looking for. So let me sit back and relax a little bit. Let me ease up off the gas pedal a little bit. And in that easing up off the gas pedal, we, the parents or the older brothers and sisters, we kind of let the lessons that we learned from our elders kind of fall by the wayside. We were so intent on letting off of the gas a little bit, we didn't bother to teach the younger ones under us Well, this is what we had to deal with.
Mm.
You don't have to deal with it as much anymore, but it's still here.
And this is
So,
why you don't have to deal with it as much.
right, right. And a lot of times, these are lessons that we didn't fully get ourselves. We kind of picked it up here and there.
Did the crack era affect the Black community as much as they say it did?
I'm going to say yeah,
Mm-hmm.
because you had a whole generation of people that basically got wiped out either through mortality or through incarceration. So that took people out of our communities, put them in the graveyard or put them in prison where we don't have ready access to them. So and there's so many smart people in our community. But the problem is, smart people can die and smart people can go to jail too. And
They say the next Obama is in prison. They say the next Michael Jordan is in prison. They say the next best author, the next singer. They say all that's in prison.
those of us who, are still out here, we're not, I don't want to say we're not to the level of an Obama or we're not to the level of a Jordan, because we are. But a lot of times we're feeling that pressure to perform to that level. And we're like, who am I to do that? Who am I to live up to that great expectation? Why is all of this falling on my shoulders? Why do I have to be the one? There's this poem by a poet named Marion Williamson. It's entitled Our Greatest Fear. And it goes basically like this: our greatest fear is not that we're powerless. Our greatest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure.
Mm.
We're afraid of ourselves. And the poem goes, your playing small does not serve the world. And we are, for lack of a better description, a lot of times we get intimidated by what we're capable of.
What you mean by that, Mr. Chris?
We are capable of greater things than we even realize. And we get intimidated by that because along with those great things that we're capable of come great expectations and great responsibilities. And we don't always feel like we can measure up to that.
Is that a generational thing? Is that a household thing? Is that a community thing? How could we start to fix that part of the problem?
We got to start with ourselves and work our way out. From my perspective, I think we have to start with ourselves. We have to challenge ourselves. And then we have to hold ourselves accountable. And when we can't hold ourselves accountable, we got to get somebody else who knows us and loves us, who's also going to hold us accountable.
Do we have a leader who we could trust?
See, that's the thing. We're always waiting for a leader.
Mm.
We don't have to wait for the leader when we can be the leader.
Mm.
That's what I mean by saying we're capable of so much more, but we're intimidated by our own potential for greatness. We don't have to wait for another Obama. We don't have to wait for another Martin, Malcolm, or Bob Marley, Marcus Garvey. All we have to do is live up to our potential.
to the youngins, right? The only real potential they know is let's say the product of my environment thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't know that they subsequent. I'm trying to use big words, Mr. Chris. I'm trying.
It's all
They don't
good. Keep it
know
real, bro.
that they subsequently gods, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they taught to represent the hoods and the wards instead of like the tribes and what's inside us, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where do we start with deprogramming them?
I'm not against representing where you're from, but learn to adapt and overcome. I was working at this job where, and you probably remember this Dave Chappelle skit where when keeping it real goes wrong.
Wrong, yeah.
So this brother is, he's a brother. He's from the hood originally, but he's Brooks Brothers suited down.
Mm-hmm. Stepping style.
And then, this co-worker of another persuasion approaches him sideways, and he's like, okay, he's faced with the choice.
Mm-hmm.
I can keep it real or I can blow this off. And he decides to keep it real. And he ends up losing that job. And next thing he knows, he's back where he began. We have to learn the code switch. We as a people, not just us older folks, but from a generational perspective, young folks, you have to learn the code switch. If you don't learn to adapt, then you will learn to fall to the wayside and die, basically. It's that stark. Adapt and overcome, or you won't survive, basically.
A lot of times we hear they use us against us. In your opinion, can you define what that means?
So a lot of times they'll give a couple of us some breaks. And they'll say, okay, if you want to maintain this level of affluence and success, you have to continue to play ball with us. You have to continue to play by our rules. So that might mean saying some things that you might not necessarily agree with, but in order to give us some political clout, you got to say you believe in these things. So, and I hate to advocate for any one political party over another because both of them have their drawbacks. But
do you believe in voting?
Yes.
Okay.
If you do not vote, then you don't have a voice. And your voice might be small, your voice might be diluted and weak, but at least you still have it.
Can I give you my opinion on why I don't?
Go ahead.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna ask you a question first, right?
Go ahead.
You're an advocate for voting, right?
I am.
Since you first voted till now, what's changed strictly from your vote?
So I'm gonna answer your question by giving you an analogy.
Oh shit. I'm gonna say, oh shoot. Come on, hit me with it.
The first election of significance that I voted in
Mm-hmm.
when I was of legal age to vote.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the first, because there's so many I can't remember.
What was this election?
It was the Louisiana governor's race back in 90 something. And Edwin Edwards was running.
Oh man.
Edwin Edwards' opponent at that time was David Duke.
Wait, hold up. So okay,
You
hold
see
on.
where I'm going with this?
Hold on. So
Do you see where I'm going with this?
Okay, so that's kind of like they took, you got to pick the lesser of the two evils.
Pretty much, because you knew at the gate that Edwin Edwards was a crooked E. We called him Slick Eddie.
Yep.
This man ran on the platform of hold your nose and vote for me. Yeah.
Hey, come on, man. I mean, it don't get no
You
realer
had
than
a
that,
choice
though.
at that time. Mm-hmm. Not all choices are going to be that stark or that extreme. However, in that particular instance, you had a choice between a racketeer and a racist. You can get somebody who you knew, he told you at the gate, oh yeah, I done dirt. Might do a little bit more when you vote for me, but guess what? It's either me or that. So what are you going to do? I held my nose and I voted for the crook.
Why cast your vote for any one of them?
Because we're not talking about just principles and higher ideals. We're talking about survival. We're talking about the survival of ourselves as a people. We're talking about representation of that city. And there were too many white people. I'm going to be frank with you. There were too many white people who were falling for that David Duke platform. There were too many of them who were fooled by the fact that, this turd polished himself up nice and shiny, but he was still a turd.
Oh, nice and shiny turd.
Pretty much. You can put lipstick on the pig. You can put the dress on that pig. You can put a string of pearls on that pig. That pig is still a pig. And David Duke was still a racist. He might have took the sheet off and he might have started speaking a little bit more carefully and candidly. But look what happened. Look what has happened to him since he lost that governor's race. This man was actually an elected political official in Louisiana because people put him in power.
And
he was a representative.
I encourage everybody to do their homework on David Duke.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Now, most recently, why is voting important? Here in Georgia, I had a choice between Reverend Dr. Raphael Warnock or Herschel Walker as the senator from the state of Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you're familiar with Herschel Walker.
Yeah, that's my dog.
Okay. Great football player. Politics? No, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Warnock was more articulate. Dr. Warnock had more experience at that time. Herschel was put up there as a prop. Bottom line up front. He was being used by those powerful forces that I talked to you about earlier, who said, okay, you're going to have to say some things that in order to further our agenda. in order to maintain the level of status that you currently have. So, what's changed between now and then? Those same forces that want to maintain a grip on power are still there. The names may have changed, the faces may have changed, but the same forces are still there, and they're still up to their old tricks. That's why it's incumbent upon me to vote.
Let me tell you why I don't.
Hmm.
My family been like we was they started teaching us stuff young, so we paid attention, right?
Mm-hmm.
They were advocate voters, right? Every election, didn't matter what it was, mayor, governor, council, president, whoever, they gonna vote, they gonna get that little stupid looking pen and they're gonna wear it proudly, right?
Mm-hmm.
I watched my mama vote for over 20 years, right? And she struggled each of them years, right? So when she finally got out the mud, she did it herself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nothing of what she voted for helped her. It was her grind, her determination, her sacrifices, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you laid up there and you went and voted for these people, right? Nothing's changed around here. You see what I'm saying?
I see your point.
So what I'm gonna vote for?
In situations like that, it's like I told you earlier. We're waiting for leaders who are going to represent us when really, in many instances, we're the leader that we've been waiting on.
I told my mama I'll vote for her. Every time she tell me about voting, I said, all right, go ahead, I'm gonna vote for you.
And keep in mind, politics is a game of personality. It's a game of compromise.
Now let me stop you right there. If you know that, why participate?
You have to make an informed choice on who it is that you're supporting, knowing that it's a game of personality and a game of compromise. You have to always be in a position where you're choosing the most nuanced person who's going to best represent you. Nobody's going to represent you 100% unless that you happens to be you running for that office. And if you feel like you're up to the task, then you do it and you try to convince as many friends, relatives, uncles, aunts, half cousins, and step cousins as possible to be in your corner when you do it. And even if you don't win, at least you will make some noise.
You see what they doing to our mayor?
Yes.
So
Yes, I'm off and on there. I don't even know what to make of that, man.
So why would I put myself in that position?
What is your alternative?
Yes.
I mean, what's the alternative? Do we let the city just fall into ruin? Or do we at least go down fighting and trying to make stuff better?
I can ask you this. We haven't fell in the ruin yet? I thought we'd been in the ruin. We came up in the ruin. You know what I'm saying?
And you see,
the more voting
we have learned to make something out of nothing. We have learned to live and subsist on as little as possible. And it's time for us to demand more.
But you know what? It seems like the more we vote and the more we get, the worse it gets for us as a people. Now, on paper, we getting what we want, but what's actually happening in life, we get nothing.
This is where holding people accountable comes in.
Mm.
It's not just enough to put somebody in a position.
Mm-hmm.
You have to constantly remind them, yo, we put you in this position so that you can accomplish certain things for our community. Now, if you're not going to accomplish those certain things, I'm sure there's somebody else waiting in the wings who's perfectly willing to do what you're not willing to do.
Who got time to run behind a grown man or a grown woman just to see if they're gonna do what they said they was gonna do?
We are fathers, we are mothers, we are older brothers and sisters.
Shout out to my little sister and my little brother.
If you can run, but if I as a father can run behind my children and ask if homework is done, if I as an older brother can consult with my younger siblings and say, yo, are y'all doing this? Are y'all taking care of that? If I as an older brother can check on them, if I can hold them accountable and I can ask them to hold me accountable, just take that to the next level.
You know why?
We got to do that. If we voted somebody in, we got to hold them accountable or we got to fire them.
You know why I can't do that? Because I'm too busy running behind my kids for the homework. I'm too busy looking out for little brother and little sis. I'm too busy. What else you said? Because I was gonna say everything you said, and then I was gonna, and then I was gonna say I'm too busy.
Life is gonna happen.
Yeah,
life is gonna happen.
Huh?
But life is gonna happen.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, just like you holding yourself accountable in the microcosm, you got to become part of that macrocosm that's holding somebody else accountable too.
So when
politics is,
look, check it out. Remember when you said when keeping it real goes wrong, right?
Yeah.
So what about when holding somebody accountable goes wrong?
I don't see that happening.
So
I have to get an analogy or example of that.
What they doing to the mayor right now?
Mm-hmm.
Where was this energy? Okay, for me, whatever I got it on my own, or I didn't get it from them, right?
Okay.
So it's the same. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. Where was this energy when any other of the mayors of another nationality was in office? Where was this same energy?
Great question.
I know.
Great question.
You feel me? So I can't respect it. I can't respect it.
I definitely feel you. And when I was coming up, we had Mayor Morial. We had Mayor Bartholomew.
Mm.
We had Mayor Morial Jr., Mark Morial.
Oh, yeah. And then we had the others.
We had others.
We had the others. You know what I'm saying? So in between time, we get Miss Cantrell, and it's all this. Where was all this energy with the others?
Now, keep in mind, they did hold what's his name?
He wanted us.
They did hold Mayor Nagin accountable.
He wanted us. He don't count.
Mm.
I said the others.
Yeah.
See how they use us against us?
Right.
So you think I'm gonna be a part of that?
No, you have a choice.
Mm-mm.
But if you support, Mayor Titi, then you support her. And if you want to hold her accountable, we hold her accountable within our community
For
whatever you think she needs to be held accountable for.
so
See,
when do
like I said, I'm removed from New Orleans right now, so I'm not down with everything that's going on there.
when do we hold ourselves accountable as a community?
Hmm. We hold ourselves accountable as a community by becoming block leaders, community leaders within our communities. I know a brother uptown New Orleans where my grandfather used to live. He's a barber. He's not just a barber, but he's a community leader. He does what he can within his particular part of the city to keep the people that he deals with informed about political moves that the city at large are trying to enact upon that particular neighborhood and community.
Why he don't run for mayor?
That's a dang good question.
I'll vote for him. He got my vote already. Let's go.
But you can't just have Stan the Barbers in trying to run uptown and the 7th Ward and the 8th Ward and everything else. You have to have Stan the Barbers for those particular areas of the city.
In other words,
It's
the
not
community.
just, yes. That's what I mean by community leaders, block by block, ward by ward. I'm going to use a biblical analogy. In the Old Testament, God recognized that Moses couldn't do it all by himself.
Mm-hmm.
So God said, look, you got to appoint people under you. And then those people who are under you have to appoint more people under them.
Mm.
Now they all report back to you, but you're making your burden a little bit easier by getting judges appointed under you. You have people in charge of tens of people in charge of hundreds, people in charge of
Wait,
thousands.
OG, run it. I got to use the bathroom here.
Yeah. So once you have these people in charge of all of these micro communities and one person in charge of the macro community, then once you have all of these people together of one accord, that's when things start happening. New Orleans would be so much better, and not just New Orleans, but all of our communities in general would be so much better if we were an active part of these communities. It's not enough to just sit back and say, oh, that's a shame. We have to do stuff that makes things better rather than just sit back and talk about why they're not better.
We tore up. They already know.
So, my brother, what I was saying is using that same analogy from the Bible that I say, you had one person in charge of about 10 people. Then you had those 10 people who reported to somebody who was in charge of 100 people.
Kind of like Jesus and the disciples.
Exactly. Then you had that 100 reporting to somebody who was in charge of thousands. And then they all reported back up to the big boss. That was a community effort. And that's what I was trying to get across. We have to be like that as a community. It's not enough to just sit back and say, in your own little prism, in your own little bubble, it's not enough to just sit back and see what's going on over here and not agreeing with it and say, oh, that's a shame. Somebody ought to do something about that. You're somebody. Why don't you do something about that? We have to have more than just a passive interest in our communities. We have to take an active role. And sometimes we're not always going to feel as if we're up to the task. But if not you, then who? And if not now, then when?
Powerful. That's powerful.
These are the things that we have to keep in mind. You're not always going to feel it. Dr. King didn't always feel like getting out there and taking them ass whippings that he took. There were times when he wanted to fight back. But he had already committed himself to the idea that nonviolence was the better witness than taking up arms against people who were unfair and were using and abusing you.
I'm more of a Malcolm, I think.
Yeah, what's the popular saying now? Dear them people, I am not my ancestors. Sincerely, these hands.
All right, Mr. Chris, before we get up out of here, right?
Yeah.
Leave us with some encouraging words. Talk to the youngsters and talk to your peers as elders.
Okay. Talk to your friends. If you want things better, talk to your friends. Gather together and talk about ways to make things better. We can talk about that. We can always sit around and talk about why things are this way or that way. We can always sit around and talk about things are bad. We have to start to learn from each other. We have to start to be more creative, just as creative as we are with our negativity. We need to start being creative with just as creative with our positivity.
Sure.
It's not enough to just say this is bad. You have to say, yeah, this is bad. How can I make it better? How can we make it better? Or do we care? That's part of holding yourself and yourselves accountable. It's not just enough to sit back and say, okay, this is terrible. I guess I'm going to just duck my head down and live in survival mode until it gets better. It's got to be about what can I do to make it better now? Who do I need to talk to? Who do I need to get with in order to make things better? And it can't always be about financial gain or worldly fame, because those things come and they go. What lasts is our community and our culture.
Yes, sir. And leave Tita alone. Leave Tita alone.
You got the mayor that you got.
Right.
Do what you can to help make it better.
Right.
Don't just sit on the sideline and throw bricks.
Be part of the solution, not part of the problem.
Exactly.
Yes, sir, man. Always a pleasure talking to you, speaking in general with you, Mr. Chris.
It's my pleasure too, brother. I'm glad we got to know each other.
It's all good. Don't salute me, bro, because I'm trying to do the humble thing, man. It's Pete
Yes, sir.
the General to Nola Podcast. You keep your body clean, huh? Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chris, bro.